Discovered my employee's true identity during a gaming stream. Now I'm figuring out how to signal support without intrusion. I stumbled upon something I never expected, and it's been on my mind ever since. I was just looking for a bit of downtime. I went to YouTube to find streams of a video game I enjoy, ready to unwind. As I browsed, I clicked on a small channel streaming that game. When the camera came on, I instantly recognized the streamer's face and voice. But here's the catch: the person I knew at work as Jane was being called Tarzan by the chat. Everyone was using he/him pronouns, and in the bio, there it was, Tarzan, he/him. A rush of concern and curiosity hit me. Of course, I didn't jump into the chat. I know for a fact that if I were streaming in my off hours, the last thing I'd want is for my coworkers, or even worse, my boss, to wander in unannounced. More importantly, though, if they were a trans man, not the cis woman they'd presented as at work, I didn't want to be the one to cause them anxiety by revealing that I knew. I fully believe it's up to each person to share their gender identity on their own terms, or not at all if that's what they choose. The place we work is a bit of an odd mix. The company has a reputation for being quite conservative, but day to day, the employees tend to be on the progressive side. I know they don't really have anything to fear job-wise, even if they decided to come out, since our country has really solid anti-discrimination laws. But of course, there are countless personal reasons why someone might not want to come out at work. Still, I keep thinking how hard it must be to force yourself back into the closet every single day, and I want them to know that if they did decide to be open at work, they'd have my support and it would be safe. Now I'm caught between wanting to subtly show my support and not wanting to intrude or push them before they're ready. I'm trying to figure out how to balance offering a sense of safety with fully respecting their privacy. Update 1. Everyone in my workplace was kind and thoughtful about the issue I faced, and many offered insightful advice. After considering my options, I decided not to say anything directly to Jane, nor did I focus any particular attention on her outside our professional interactions. Instead, I shifted my focus to ensuring that everyone in our workplace felt safe and respected, without singling anyone out. I also stayed away from her YouTube channel. It just felt wrong to blur the boundaries between Jane's personal and professional life. Popping up in her comments section as her manager, or quietly following her without her knowledge, felt uncomfortably close to stalking. If I started streaming as a hobby, I certainly wouldn't want anyone from work, especially my supervisor, showing up in my audience without my knowing. And honestly, when I want to watch streams of video games, I have more than enough channels to choose from. I didn't need to watch hers in particular. Jane never did end up coming out at work, but about a month after all of this, another employee did. Let's call him Eric, except, about a week after my letter, Eric came out as Ariel, a trans woman. Keeping with our team's theme of Disney names, it felt only fitting. I realized immediately that I needed to make it absolutely clear that any kind of discrimination toward her wouldn't be tolerated under my supervision. Anyone harassing or disrespecting Ariel would answer directly to me. I also doubled down on educating myself about gender identity. I'd already started reading and learning before, but this real-world situation gave me even more urgency. I was now managing a trans person, not as a vague possibility, but as my daily reality. Fortunately, my team was every bit as open-minded as I hoped. There was an adjustment period as everyone got used to Ariel's new name and pronouns, but any mistakes were met with gentle correction from Ariel, and my team was gracious in accepting it. Now, nobody slips up. Well, almost nobody. Once, I overheard someone ask Ariel if she was considering bottom surgery, a wildly inappropriate question for the workplace. I immediately stepped in and asked if I'd just heard them inquire about a coworker's genitalia. The look of shock on their face told me they hadn't realized how utterly out of line they were. Maybe it was simple curiosity, maybe cluelessness, but either way, I made sure to shut that down pronto. As I often say, as far as I'm concerned, my coworkers might as well be Barbie and Ken dolls. None of us need to know or care what's going on downstairs, and I won't tolerate prying or invasive questions. I reminded the team that, besides being wildly inappropriate, that sort of thing could lead to a sexual harassment complaint. It only had to be said once. Ariel and I talked about it afterwards, and I told her she was never obligated to answer questions like that, and she could always come to me if anyone made her feel uncomfortable. Where things got messier was outside my team. The rest of our company, unfortunately, wasn't so welcoming. While nothing was done that could officially count as discrimination under the law, it became painfully clear that following the letter of the law is not the same as following its spirit. Our company issues uniforms, and while women are allowed to wear skirts or trousers, men are required to wear trousers. It's a gendered standard I'd hoped we'd be beyond by now. When Ariel started her transition, they refused to give her a skirt until she legally changed her name and gender. Only then, they insisted, would they recognize her as female, according to policy. This also forced her, for months, to introduce herself as Mr. Eric X on the phone and in her emails, because her records wouldn't be updated until her legal change went through. A bureaucratic nightmare that can stretch from weeks to over a year depending on where you live. I pushed hard against this. I argued that the spirit of the law mattered, not just the words on paper. I tried to be there for Ariel, offering a sympathetic ear when she needed to vent. Our own team was supportive, but it took many complaints to HR and some casual remarks overheard by higher-ups about how embarrassing and regressive this all was before the company started to backpedal. Eventually, Ariel got her new uniform and could finally present herself as her real, authentic self, something that should have happened without a fight. But, of course, this progress didn't come without its own twist. Now management likes to trot Ariel out as some kind of evidence of how inclusive we are. During the retirement speech of our former head of HR, the words, "I'm proud to have worked at a company that accepted Ariel, a trans woman, with open arms," were squeezed out with zero self-awareness. The discomfort in the audience was palpable, never more than for Ariel herself. It got worse. Once, when a new employee was being introduced to the staff, my boss announced, "And this is Ariel, our very own trans lady." Immediately, outrage rippled through our group. I cut in and pointed out, 1. People are not tokens to be shown off for diversity points. You wouldn't point out, "This is our very own BIPOC employee." 2. The language was objectifying as it implied Ariel somehow belonged to the company. And 3. He had just outed her without her prior knowledge or consent. He apologized in front of everyone, but later reprimanded me behind closed doors for undermining him. Still, I have no regrets. Calling it out was absolutely the right thing to do. Reporting the incident to HR seems to have gone nowhere. Maybe he got a warning, maybe not, but nothing changed, as far as I can tell. It's not a perfect update, I hesitate to call it even good. The way our company handled Ariel's situation has made her rethink whether she wants to stay here, and I wouldn't blame her for seeking a place that actually lives up to its values. If she leaves, I'll miss her. She's a fantastic colleague and genuinely good person, but I'll be ready with a glowing recommendation. I've even started quietly updating my own resume, not because I'm planning to leave immediately, but because I want to stay and support Ariel as long as she's with us. If the time comes for a change, I want her to know she'll have an ally wherever she goes. Update 2. Two things collided at once. The first was a government tender our company had been chasing for months. Buried in the requirements was a line item about demonstrable inclusion policies and practices, and for once, that wasn't just a checkbox. We made the shortlist, some auditor dug in, and suddenly HR was calling me to ask if any of the things I'd been agitating for could be written down as if they'd existed all along. I said they could be written down, yes, but in the about to exist tense. That's how I found myself on a hastily assembled task force with legal and IT, drafting a preferred name policy, revising our records to separate display names from legal names, and nuking the gendered uniform rule from orbit. We also did the small, practical things that make the big gestures matter. The phone system stopped forcing Mr/Ms into greetings, email display names could be updated without a legal change, ID badges got reissued without argument. It's not that I had special power, just urgency. Legal, to their credit, did most of the heavy lifting and, once they realized this wasn't going away, moved faster than I expected. The second thing was messier and much more human. During a vendor demo, my boss decided to be charming. He introduced one of my analysts with, "And Ariel here, our trailblazer," in that syrupy tone that meant he thought he was about to say something enlightened. I was already halfway to opening my mouth when Ariel said, very calmly, "Please don't make my gender your meeting opener." The silence that followed was profound. The vendor lead, bless her, responded with a crisp, "Apologies, Ariel," and dove into her slides. After the meeting, my boss tried to scold me for not lightening the mood. I told him he'd made it heavy, not her. That would have been one more brick in a long wall of irritations if it hadn't also been a recorded call. The vendor's account manager sent me a note later, "Hey, I don't know your internal politics, but this is the kind of thing that costs you points on our side." She attached the clip. I didn't even have to send it to HR. It went up the chain via procurement attached to a risk memo about the tender. A week later, my boss was no longer in the reporting line. The email said strategic projects, which we all know is corporate for far away from people. I have very mixed feelings about people losing power because of their worst moments. I also don't have the energy to apologize for being relieved. There was a lot happening at once, and of course that's when my door clicked shut and Jane stood there, took a breath, and said, "I want to change my name at work. I'm Elliot." He/him. I don't think I've ever been more grateful for having done the boring administrative work first. We talked through what he wanted, how to roll it out, who to tell and when, whether to send an email to the team or let it spread naturally. He opted for a quiet Monday morning note from me to our immediate group, a new email display name, and stickers on his water bottle and laptop that said he/him that he bought himself. He didn't want a big fuss, just to stop bracing for his dead name every time the phone rang. We still had some bumps. Someone in payroll sent an all-staff template about benefits that pulled his dead name from a hidden field. He forwarded it to me with, "I know you're on it," which was kinder than I deserved in that moment. I was on it, but I also wrote back and apologized. You can't fix systems without acknowledging the ways they're still breaking people. IT traced the issue to a legacy report and killed it within the hour. Later that day, when I asked Elliot how the week was going, he said, "Honestly? Better than I expected. I thought changing my signature would make it real in a scary way. It made it real in a good way." Ariel watched all of this with a measure of quiet satisfaction I didn't understand until she said, "It's easier to be the first when you stop being the only." She's still job hunting. She told me that hasn't changed, but she also volunteered to be part of a working group for our new policies. And, in a moment that pulled the rug out from under me, recommended me to chair it. "You're the first manager I've had who didn't make me teach them," she said. "That's worth something." The tender deadline forced everyone's hand. We ran an internal pilot of the new policies with our team as guinea pigs. We did a quick, quiet training, no rainbow confetti, no inspirational video montage, just a lawyer explaining what the law requires and a facilitator explaining why we should be trying to meet more than the minimum. People asked the questions they've been holding in: how to correct a colleague without making a scene, how to handle travel when IDs don't match presentation, what to do when a client writes back with "Dear Mr. Elliott." We didn't answer everything perfectly, but we gave people scripts and permission to use them, and that seemed to loosen something. The craziest day, the day where I thought, I cannot believe this is my life, arrived courtesy of a flight to a client site. Travel had booked Ariel and Elliot together, plus me and one other analyst. Security pulled Ariel aside because her ID still lagged behind her transition. We had prepared a letter, it did the job, it was still draining for her. Elliot, watching, went pale and then absolutely still. He had, tucked into his backpack, the same letter drafted for him in case he needed it. No one asked for it. He took it out anyway and said, "I'll go through the manual screening." The agent blinked at him and said, "Sir, you don't need," and he said, "I know. I'm choosing to." A small, unnecessary, deeply meaningful act of solidarity. It slowed us down by 10 minutes and somehow bought us an inch of air back. We made our flight. I read the executive summary for the tender in the air and almost laughed. They wanted evidence of culture change. By the time we landed, HR had circulated the new policy company-wide. It wasn't perfect, but it was something I could sign my name to. The old uniform form with its Mr./Ms was gone. The email template that forced titles was gone. The line that caused months of grief, "gendered uniform selection available upon legal change," was gone. In its place, select the uniform that aligns with your gender and presentation. Full stop. I didn't plan on telling anyone this part, but it feels relevant. The night Elliot sent that first "Call Me Elliot" message to the team, I walked home and passed a bar with a trivia night. The category was Disney. The host said, "Name the couple, Jane and someone yelled Tarzan." And the whole room groaned because it was too easy. I don't believe in cosmic signs, but I do sometimes appreciate a well-timed wink from the universe. I did not say anything to Elliot about it. He deserves a life that isn't a choose-your-own-adventure of coincidence. We didn't win the tender, we came second, and the postmortem didn't even mention inclusion as a shortcoming, which is a sentence I wouldn't have imagined writing 6 months ago. It's possible another team will win a different bid because of the work we did. It's possible none of this will matter in the way senior leadership measures things. It matters anyway. Ariel told me yesterday that she's accepted another offer. It pays more and, more importantly, she lit up when she described the way they talked about their employees. I congratulated her and told her I'd already drafted a reference so embarrassingly glowing she'd probably need sunglasses to read it. She laughed and said, "I'll be fine." "Are you going to be okay here?" I told her the truth, I don't know yet. For now, my team is okay. Elliot is okay. The work is less of a fight than it was. That might be enough for the moment. One last, strange epilogue to the YouTube thread I started all this with. I still haven't gone back to that channel. But this afternoon, on the way out of a meeting, Elliot held the door for me and said, with a grin that felt a little like a dare, "I'm thinking about doing a charity stream this weekend." I said, "I hope you raise a lot of money," and kept walking because boundaries are boundaries and also because I wanted to give him the space to decide how much of himself to bring into the workplace. He called after me, "If anyone asks where I am on Saturday, tell them I'm saving the rainforest." I didn't turn around, but I let myself smile the whole way down the hall. Update 3. Elliot did the charity stream, and I kept my deal with myself and didn't watch. On Monday, he arrived with a hoarse voice and the tired, bright look of someone who has been very online for too many hours and would do it again. He said, "We hit 5 figures," in the same tone you might reserve for "I saw a comet." He'd picked an environmental NGO with a tiny staff and a scrappy website, and somehow half the team had found their way into his donation link anyway. Our CFO sent a note asking if the company could match as a one-off. I forwarded it to legal expecting a no with citations and got back, "Yes, and we'll add a line to the policy for employee charity matches that aren't on the official list." Sometimes governance surprises you in the right direction. The part that turned the week was not internal at all. One of our legacy clients, the kind with a name people recognize and a procurement process that could take down a healthy ox, sent an agenda for a kickoff. Elliot replied with the usual logistics and his signature, which now had him in it. 10 minutes later, sales pinged me. They'd been forwarded a note from the client's operations director: "Please remove political messaging from signatures. Please also do not include the analyst, referenced below, on calls. We'd prefer someone more neutral." There's a particular kind of anger that feels like standing very still. I asked sales to forward me the thread. I wrote back to the director, "We don't characterize pronouns as political messaging. If pronouns in an email signature are a blocker for your team, we're not the right partner." I CC'd our account lead and legal and then shut my laptop for a full 60 seconds because my hands were shaking. Chaos, of course. Sales, panicked and reasonable, came to my door. "Couldn't we just send someone else?" Legal texted, "Let us get you language." Leadership called a quick huddle. No one wanted to lose the revenue. No one wanted a precedent on paper that said we'd change who people were to fit a client's comfort level. Our general counsel, who has the steady cadence of an NPR host, said, if you cave once, it's standard operating procedure to ask again. I'd rather we not train the market. The client escalated, as clients do, up their chain in hours. The CEO called me and asked what happened. I told him. He was quiet for a beat and then said, okay. He sent a short, boring email to the client's counterpart about misalignment of values, and that was that. You could feel the axis of the floor tilt when the "we're stepping back" note went out. People sent me messages I didn't answer because I didn't want to turn it into a victory lap. Elliot came by my desk and stood there with his hands jammed into his pockets like he was afraid of his own elbows. I have never had a boss lose money for me before, he said. I told him it wasn't for him. It was for our policy. He said, same difference, and walked away before I could get sentimental. Facility-wise, we were still tripping on the little things. Security flagged Elliot one morning because his badge still used his old photo and the guard on duty hadn't been briefed on the "don't interrogate people at turnstiles" memo. It lasted 30 seconds and felt like 30 minutes. I called facilities and asked if we could do a badge refresh blitz without the usual formality. The guy from facilities said, we could do that while we swap the signage. He'd been sitting on a pile of gender-neutral bathroom signs waiting for the right time. We decided the right time was Tuesday. A week later, the working group I now, somehow, chair kicked off a benefits review. HR had been negotiating with our insurer for months about inclusive language and coverage, and you could see the point where the vendor realized they were going to lose us if they didn't keep up. They stopped sending us brochures with blue silhouettes of men and pink silhouettes of women, and they fixed the language around family planning so it didn't assume anything about anyone's body or partner. An analyst in another department sent me a one-line email. I used the preferred name field and my boss didn't blink. Thank you. I wrote back, I'm glad. It felt inadequate and exactly right. Meanwhile, Ariel re-entered our orbit like a comet. Procurement scheduled a vendor meeting for a tool we've been threatening to implement forever, and when the Zoom populated, there she was, hair a little shorter, voice a little steadier, the same dry tilt to her smile. Her new email had her actual name with no quotation marks around it, which felt like a triumph all on its own. She handled the demo like she'd been born to it, fielded our questions without letting anyone talk over her, and at one point corrected a colleague on a technical detail so gently he said, thank you. Afterward, she stayed on the call for a minute while others clicked away and said, your reference letter read like a love letter to my competence. I told her it wasn't wrong. She said, how's the committee life? I said, I've begun hoarding snacks for the long meetings. She laughed. We ended up picking her company as the preferred vendor, and there was something right about signing a contract with her name on it. I wish the story stayed tidy there, but of course it didn't. The old boss in strategic projects resigned. The email said he was pursuing new opportunities. The rumor was that he'd been offered a consulting gig and a chance to move cities. HR asked me to step in as interim for his department while they figured out the org. I said yes because I knew who would end up under me if I said no, and I didn't like that vision. My calendar became a Tetris board. The work didn't get less human. During my second week in the wider role, a junior analyst from a different team booked 15 minutes and closed the door and said, I'm going to start tea, and I don't know how to ask for time off without making a committee of my body. We talked through what paperwork would be required and what wouldn't, how much he wanted to disclose and to whom, how we could write the calendar entries so it met the letter of our transparency culture without offering up his medical life for inspection. We used the new leave category HR had snuck in under serious health treatment with a subcode for gender-affirming care. We wrote a note together to his manager that said enough and not too much. He thanked me and then, as he left, turned back and said, I watched that thing with the client. That's not nothing. I told him the truth. Some days it felt like everything and some days it felt like a drop in the ocean. He said, drops make puddles. The strangest day, strange like a mirror at a slight angle, happened when Ariel came on site for implementation. She walked past facilities just as they were swapping the last of the bathroom signs. One of our senior leaders, who means well and sometimes directs it like a garden hose on full blast, said, look. We're doing the thing. Ariel, to her credit, beamed at the facilities guy instead of the executive and said, thank you for doing the thing. The executive looked chastened and a little entertained. It was a small course correction, as elegant as a hand on a ship's wheel. We did end up in the press, just a sidebar in a trade outlet that covered the vendor deal and mentioned our robust inclusion policy. It was the kind of paragraph no one at a normal dinner party would bring up, and in corporate life that counts as a good day. The board took that as their excuse to nudge the tender people again, and somehow a different agency asked us to present on operationalizing inclusivity. I sent legal and our HR partner, not because I was avoiding it but because I wanted the people who write it to be the ones who say it out loud. On a Friday that already felt like a month, Elliot forwarded me an email he'd gotten from the same client who'd tried to bench him. It was short, we heard about the decision. Respect. He didn't reply. Neither did I. Sometimes the fact that they had to write it is the point. And because the universe cannot resist a callback, the night we signed the vendor agreement with Ariel's company, I walked home past a busker with a small amp and a battered guitar. He was playing Phil Collins from the Tarzan soundtrack, and I laughed out loud on the sidewalk like a person who has been given a private joke in public. I did not tell Elliot. He deserves a life where the coincidences are just good songs on a cold night. 2 weeks later, I got a photo on my phone from an unknown number, a picture of a bulletin board at a university career fair with our logo under a sign that said, "You can bring your whole self here." The text said, "Spotted this, might apply." No name, just a screenshot of a draft email to recruiting with they slash them in the signature. I saved the number and wrote back, "We mean it." It felt dangerously like a promise. I hope we keep earning it. Update 4. The week started with a meeting that had ordinary stamped on it and refused to comply. We'd landed a global rollout with a client whose headquarters are here and whose regional offices are not. The plan on paper looked clean: 2 weeks on site in country A, handoff in country B, celebratory slide deck with logos. The friction arrived as a calendar invite: travel kickoff, Elliot to lead. I clicked it open, looked at the flagged risk report for country B, and felt something in my sternum say, no. We didn't have a formal policy for identity-based travel risk. We had quiet workarounds and a lot of people choosing to not make anyone uncomfortable by existing. I sent a message to HR that said, "I won't send someone somewhere their ID or presentation makes them unsafe. We need a policy that says that out loud." HR wrote back, "Come to legal at 2. By the time the clock hit 3, we had a draft with words like non-penalized opt-out and equivalent remote leadership opportunities. It wasn't elegant, but it was legible. We brought Elliot in and asked him what he wanted. He stared at the map on the wall like it had offended him personally and said, "I want the work. I don't want to be an experiment at immigration." We wrote the plan so we wouldn't have to be either. The client pushed. "Our teams do better in person." Legal, bless them, said, "Our teams do better alive." We flew 2 analysts who were comfortable and well prepared, built a telepresence rig that made Elliot the biggest face in the room, set the hours to overlap, and told the client that if this didn't work we'd revisit. It worked. It was so boring it was beautiful. Weekly progress, no incidents. A project manager in country B who sent us a separate note saying, "Thank you for not asking your people to take on our laws by themselves." A different fire, dumber and hotter, lit in finance. A new hire in accounting uses they slash them. Their manager, practiced and calm, sent the standard intro. A senior accountant replied all with a line about the English language and my beliefs. I called him into a room. He started with a speech he'd clearly rehearsed, and I let him finish because sometimes you need people to hear their own logic in the air. When he reached the part about being forced to participate, I said, "I am not interested in your belief system. I am responsible for the environment our employees work in. You're not required to believe anything you don't. You are required not to harass your colleagues. Use their name. Don't editorialize." He nodded, tight, and lasted a week before making a joke in a meeting that landed like a brick. We followed our own rubric. Documented. Coached. Wrote down exactly what would happen next. He decided he didn't like those terms and resigned, loudly, to anyone who would listen. I did not chase him. Sometimes the absence of someone is the policy functioning. Ariel continued orbiting our days like the sort of comet that crosses the sky at exactly the right time. Her implementation team came on site for a sprint. In a rare lull, we had coffee in the cafeteria that pretends to be a cafe by owning a chalkboard. She said, "I'm keynoting a small conference. I'm going to talk about how boring process makes inclusion stick." I said, "God's work." She grinned and said, "Please don't call me clergy." The part that knocked me sideways came a few days later. Facilities emailed that badges were ready for anyone who'd requested a refresh. Elliot walked down with me because you can talk about systems all you want. The system for him is a piece of plastic that either greets him with his name or doesn't. The guard who'd stopped him before was on duty, new signs over his shoulder. He looked at the old badge, then the new photo, then at Elliot and said, carefully, "Congratulations on your update, sir." It wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. Elliot stared at the badge like it was a small animal that might run away if he moved too fast, then said, "Thanks." We went back upstairs and he put it on a lanyard the way you put on a jacket you've wanted for years. Marketing tried to do a thing and, for once, mostly did it right. The company's charity committee heard about Elliot's stream and pitched a spotlight post. He said yes, with conditions: no dead name, no brave, no implying he'd done it for us. The post that went up read like a human wrote it. One of our analysts raised X for Y last weekend. We matched. Here's the link to the NGO. The comments did what comments do. Our social media manager, who has the vigilance of a raccoon guarding a shiny thing, deleted the trash and wrote to me, "Feels nice to moderate for good, occasionally." In the middle of that, the org chart tried to make its mind up about me. HR asked me to remove the interim from my title. The COO took me to lunch in a place with linen napkins to tell me that, gently, fewer surprises would be good. I said, "I don't surprise people for sport. I surprise people when the alternative is harm." He said, "Don't make me defend you to the board." I said, "Then write the policies so you don't have to." 2 days later, the board signed off on the travel policy, the uniform language, and a one-page statement that pronouns weren't politics. I accepted the role because it's easier to hold the wheel when your hands are supposed to be there. Somewhere between all of that and the coffee that never cooled, the email from the unknown number that had sent me the career fair photo became a person. They showed up for an interview with a neat notebook and a steady voice, introduced themselves, and used they slash them without rounding the corners. The hiring panel did their job without a single rubberneck. Later, after we made an offer, they wrote me one line, "You said you meant it." I wrote back, "We're trying every day to prove it." Their manager sent me a photo on their first day of a desk with a small plant and no fuss. Every time I think the systems are done spitting out ghosts, one more pops. The mailroom delivered a packet of insurance brochures to Elliot under his dead name because the external vendor had cached a month's-old export. He brought it to me, eyebrows up. We sat in a conference room and called the vendor together on speaker. I watched their rep apologize and then watched the moment where she understood that this wasn't a note for future editions but a breach of trust for which you say "I'm sorry," and then you fix it. She did. Our benefits person, who used to live for detail and now breathes it, sent a note to the list, "If you get anything with a name you don't use, send it to me. We'll chase it." And then, because the world can be ridiculous and elegant in the same week, procurement hosted a vendor appreciation night at a bar with a terrible band and better fries. Ariel's team showed up. A junior from her side who hadn't met me typed her name into my phone to order a drink and then looked up and said, "I applied because of that stupid little trade article." I said, "I'm fond of that stupid little trade article." Later, as we were leaving, someone on the sidewalk was busking with a keyboard, coaxing out the intro from "You'll Be in My Heart," and I stood there like the world had decided to put a caption under the last 12 months. I do not believe in fate. I do believe in competent pianists who make the cold feel less sharp. I did not text Elliot. He deserves to go home and feed his cat and not have his manager DM him with Disney. On a Tuesday that felt like a Thursday, security emailed me a headcount for people who'd opted into the travel policy. Names we knew, names we didn't, a reminder that most of the change lives under the waterline. The same day, sales sent me a note forwarded from that client who had benched us for pronouns. "We have a new team lead. Are you open to revisiting?" I wrote back that our policies were public and not negotiable. They replied, "Good. That makes it easier." Elliot saw the thread because he was CC'd this time on purpose. He leaned in my doorway and said, "It's weird to be the hill someone decides not to die on." I said, "It's nice when the hills get lower." He nodded, then said, "I'm thinking of doing a stream for a legal aid org." I told him the same thing I always do, "Tell me where to send the receipt." He said, "You're getting predictable." I said, "That's policy." On my first official day with the new title on the org chart, a chocolate bar appeared on my desk with a note that said, "In someone's precise hand, for steering." It had a tiny plastic toy taped to it, the kind that falls out of a vending egg, an inch-high gorilla with improbable abs. I looked around and no one looked at me. I put the gorilla on the edge of my monitor. I went to my first leadership meeting as the person who gets to say, "We can do better," and have it land like direction, instead of complaint. On the walk home, the florist on the corner had hung vines down over their window like a jungle had decided to run a small business. I don't need the universe to wink to keep going. It keeps winking anyway.